Welcome to your awakening journey. Today's destinations include higher consciousness and actualized potential. If all ascenders could now please be seated in a comfortable meditative posture, we're about to ascend. You are now arriving at your host, Bryan Henry.
What is up, Ascenders? Welcome back to the Awaken podcast. We are back up and we are rolling, and this is going to be a pretty great episode to kickstart things because the guest that I am bringing on today is one that I've been trying to get on the show for about a year now, and I'm super excited to be getting her on today. It's going to be powerful stuff. So, little update just before we dive in. There's been a lot going on in the Together We Ascend team and community. We got the academy up and going. That's been getting off the ground. We've been putting together a lot of content, and that's kind of where the focus has been for this past few months. So that's one of the reasons why the podcast hasn't been as consistent as I'd like it to be. Now, do know that moving forward, things are about to change. The Awaken podcast is coming to you every week moving forward, guys. That's the intention that I've set because I know this is something that I need to be bringing through. I absolutely love having these interviews, these conversations, and having you guys in here with me at the live streams has been awesome. So do know that the new plan is to get this thing going again once a week. Currently, the time's set for Tuesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern if you want to join us for the live stream. And then, of course, the replays are always made available on all the different podcast feeds. So I'll shoot links to all for those down in the description below if you're here with me in the live stream. But then, of course, you can always check out togetherwithascend.com/awaken if you want to check out any of the past episodes. So let's dive into today's episode because, like I said, this guest is one that I'm ready to bring on. She, quick backstory, I first found out about Lori Ivey about a year ago when I stumbled upon the Guide to Ascension Facebook group. And that's a Facebook group that she founded that's absolutely booming, has, I believe, over 20,000 members in it. And that was actually one of the first groups that I saw that was so successful in bringing together a strong community of, I want to say, awakened souls. I'm not a big fan of the word awaken, but I think you guys know what I mean when I say the spiritual community, the community of individuals that are seeking to bring light and love into this world. That group was probably the first one I saw doing this and doing it at the scale that they were doing it at. And that was an inspiration for me because in that moment I started to realize what could be possible for a group like this. And I don't know if she realizes how much of an inspiration this has served for me in growing this community. Since then, I've connected with a few other communities of the sort, but that was definitely the first one. So it's incredible to have experienced that and to see that group and be a part of it. Go ahead and check out that Guide to Ascension Facebook group if you're not a part of it already. You want to be. That took me into, of course, contacting Lori because I saw she was the founder. I had to get to know who was behind this amazing group. Stumbled upon her profile, and from there, the rest is history. Lori's putting out some amazing content frequently. I think she posts like 2-3 times a day. And you just got to go check out her profile as well because she has amassed an amazing tribe, an amazing following of, I believe, over 25,000 people on Facebook, which is huge for Facebook. And there's a reason for that. She's putting out some amazing content. And the thing that probably interests me most about it, and this is something we're definitely going to have to dive into today, is the activations she is bringing through in her live stream content. So I'm ready to talk to her. I think you guys are ready to see her too. I'm going to bring her on. Let's see. I can feel the energies coming through. That's Lori's soul about to enter. Oh, there it is.
Hello.
Lori, welcome to
Hey,
the
Bryan.
show. Thank you for being here and being willing to come just spread your light with us.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I'm so grateful for the opportunity and the invitation, and it's a very exciting time to be alive and to be a human and to be activated in this conscious awareness and sharing all this love and light with everyone. So I appreciate all the work you're doing and, as part of the mission here and sharing your love and light. So it's wonderful that we get to align today.
Yes, 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 yes. And making it perhaps even more exciting was the anticipation of having to wait to get you on, because I think I probably first contacted you, I think it was about a year ago. And it's been, a slow build up of anticipation. We've kind of come together every so often saying we're going to do it, we're going to set it up, but we're here now and it's finally about to go down.
Yes, today's the day.
There you go. So, before we even get into it, I want to give you a quick thank you, because I don't think you really realize or can even know yet that you have played a bigger part in my journey than you probably realize, because I was just bringing it up on the intro there. I don't know if you're yet in the chat room, but the Guide to Ascension Facebook group was, I believe, the first Facebook group that I saw that was so successful at amassing a tribe of beautiful, conscious, high-vibing souls. And when I saw that, just doors of possibility started opening up in my mind. It started to become, I looked at that group and I saw what this group, this Facebook community, the Ascenders Facebook community could become. And it was just really reaffirming to know that, there's so many people out there on Facebook that are looking to connect with other people and speak to some of the things that we speak to. So I want to thank you for that inspiration. It really has played a big part in my journey.
Oh, thank you so much. And that's the beauty of doing what we feel is right in our heart. And I was inspired in the same kind of way. I was in a very large group when I first got activated in 2016, as in the second, or in a different spectrum of activating. And I was connecting with people on this open heart, mindful way that I'd never done before. And I was, for some reason, blocked out of the group one day, and I got this activation, this download in my mind to create that space for myself. I was so inspired by that group that I thought, I'm just going to create a community on my own page, my own profile. I'm not going to start any groups yet. I'm just going to open up my Facebook page to public and just start sharing content. And it took off from there. I mean, in the first quarter of 2016, I had 325 friends, and within 9 months, there were over 20,000 people. And then, I mean, it happened so fast. And then I started creating groups and pages and becoming, editors on other pages. And I saw how fast the light spreads. I saw how fast mindfulness and love spreads. And so, yeah, we're all inspiring one another on here. And I'm so excited that you brought that up and we're talking about it today, because it means so much. One of the main reasons why I wanted to do all of this is because when I got activated really strongly and I didn't have anyone around me, and I craved that sense of community, of confirmation and synchronicity. And the more I realized, I want to just spread what I feel within me so that others don't feel as alone, or that they just understand that someone gets them to some degree. And that was my driving motivation from the very beginning.
I love it. And it totally lines up with everything that I stand for. It always comes back for me to community, to tribe, to connection. The energy is contagious. It has this way of attracting people who aren't yet even sure of what it is that they like about it. They just are going to naturally gravitate to that high vibing, positive, loving energy. and it just spreads out into this world. So I always come to think of it as we're just these beacons for light, and the more that we put that out there into this world, the more it's going to spread. And it has this, I always like to say that it has this ripple effect that goes beyond what we can even imagine. And
Oh yeah.
that's how powerful we are.
Yeah. So that is how powerful we are. It's really incredible, like the thoughts we think about ourselves and others sets that frequency through the ether. It's not just about what happens internally, it's this beautiful thing. And yeah, it's really incredible. And one of the things that I wanted to talk a little bit about that just came into my mind was talking about, when I started sharing, I feel in the pull to share myself, and, talking about, as a contact ET first, before the healing spectrum got activated. I was all about DNA activations up front, and, talking about all this stuff that was coming in. And I went through the motions of overcoming the fear of judgment from others, and just kept sharing it and kept sharing it, because every comment, every share, every message where someone says, oh, you understand me, I don't feel alone now, that is what it's about. I mean, I can talk about some stuff that could be pretty out there for people, and I have people sometimes will say, I don't know what you're right, and that's what it all boils down to. Like you say, like the light shines the way, because it's what we feel instinctively versus letting our mind start to break it down and analyze things. And that's the power of love. The light shines the brightest, and like a moth to a flame, it's amazing.
Mm-hmm. I like that, and it's that one thing that I try to stay rooted in, and it's a challenge at times. You mentioned the fear of judgment, and I think that's something we can definitely explore a little bit more, because I can definitely see in this space, there's a lot of people that's suppressing themselves, suppressing their truth because of ultimately the fear of judgment. And it's, again, something that I definitely have to deal with sometimes too. One of the things I try to integrate is that, our only responsibility is to be our truth and to line up with what feels right, what feels good, what feels true to us. How people respond to that, the reactions that we are met, perhaps the skepticism that we are met by, that's not within our responsibility or our control. And that's not something that we should be too fixated on, because in being so focused on how other people are receiving it or responding to it, that can trigger that fear of judgment and concern around, well, what are people thinking about me? And that, I find, has this way of suppressing us. So what I really want to do for myself, again, it's about integrating this more and more myself, and then encouraging others to do so for themselves as well, is, be your truth in the face of it all. And I think your story is the perfect example of how powerful that can be, because you mentioned the group exploded. It was, you said 20,000 people. How many thousand in the first 9 months?
On my personal profile, that happened, and I think now we're at about 30 to 31,000 on my personal profile. And then I had a different group, and I shifted out of that one and created a different group. And so, the numbers have staggered here and there, and the pages, and if you go to my profile, you can see a list of all of the amazing pages that I work with, and some of the pages I create, and other people help me with those as well. And I love having a space to share and create. And that's what's been the greatest gift of all of this, is just continuing to shine our light, even if someone doesn't understand, because really judgment is a lack of understanding to some degree within ourselves. And so what I suggest is that if someone comes at you with judgment, or questioning, encourage that, allow them that space and say, yes, that's right. Use discernment, find out for yourself, believe me if you want to or not. And I think that sets a different frequency for people to go, oh, okay. And I heard someone else say that once, and I think it's a really great thing. It's like, yeah, good, question things, like get inside of yourself and want to know like how to connect and just all of the amazing things that we talk about.
I think the big difference between how you are approaching that in what you just said with, inviting people in to check in with themselves and how use discernment, that's a great way of putting it, is you're not coming to the table and saying, this is how it is, this is what you need to believe in, this is the truth, right? Rather, you're directing them inward. And I think that's the difference between someone that is claiming to have all the answers, which nobody does, and someone that's looking to guide someone to their authentic, to their higher selves. And that's I think perhaps the greatest thing that we can do for anyone, to direct them inward, to let them know that the greatest guidance we can ever give them is to trust their own internal guidance. Now, there of course is little bits and pieces to unfolding the layers that get in between us and that space within us that is knowing, that is safe, that is secure. But I do totally respect the approach of, just encouraging others to use discernment and trust in themselves. That I think is super important.
Yeah, definitely. Energetic responsibility, it's all necessary within our own selves to see what resonates. Because for me, I know like there have been times throughout this process where I would like kind of look at things like, oh, I don't know about that, and then later come back around full circle. So I find that it's easier for, to be mindful and open and take everything with a grain of salt and get within and listen, because that's where it all is. And I find when we get out of the business of telling people what to do and just lead by example, by our own truth, that sets a greater frequency of just shining our own individual light. And that is the greatest thing for me. I mean, I realized like I think I feel like I spent a lot of years pointing things out and telling people things about themselves and myself and it didn't really get received well, often. And then I realized, I had to turn that inwards and shine my own light outwardly. And then everything changed. People, like I was attracting people of that vibration versus constantly hitting mental roadblocks with the programming that we all have within ourselves.
Yeah, it's the difference between like this, I think this pushing, right? We're this pushing energy that goes outward that I feel like can be a little bit exhausting at times, rather than, again, just coming into the space of, I'm going to shift my personal frequency. And I think that's perhaps ultimately the greatest thing that we can do for others even. I'm going to come into the space of being my truth, shifting my own personal frequency, and let that be what creates impact and creates that ripple effect that we mentioned. And I'm seeing it for myself too. The more that I make that the focus, opposed to being so outward focused and so focused on what's happening on the surface, how are people taking it, what sort of reactions am I getting? It goes back to the point that I wanted to make earlier, was the more we shift into that focus and that space of trusting our own selves, then the results tend to, the outward results, those tend to just start to manifest so naturally. And that's kind of what the example of your Facebook page blowing up, I was bringing that up for, is that I've seen it myself too. And I know it because I know when I'm in that space and I know when I'm not. And when I'm in that space of inner alignment, opposed to being so focused on the outward. It's interesting because the results that I do want to see, that I know I do want to see in my outward reality, those just start to flow so much more naturally. So it happens when you're not trying so hard to make it happen, and you're just starting with what's going on internally. Does that resonate?
Oh, it's like the number one thing that each human must realize is that everything comes in the present moment. And, I think to expect ourselves to be in that state all the time is just not, I mean, it's really about recognizing that the ebbs and flows of life, situations, and different people, because it's not just about floating around in our own program. We interact with other humans, and then therefore we take on their, so there's this whole thing. It's like, yeah, it's just realizing that when the outside world is there for us to engage in, that's why we're here, to build and create. And it's about not taking it all so personally and listening within, because that really is where the inspiration comes from. I find that if I'm getting myself in a swirl, that's the programming, that I need to slow down, pause, ground, and come back full circle. And sometimes I can do that in nanoseconds, and then sometimes it takes days or months, depending on what is going on. I mean, for me, like, I thought, wow, I'm really at a good place, and my consciousness and everything is just so like unicorns and rainbows, and then all of the sudden something comes up and it's like, whoa, how did I get back in this place,
Yeah.
And so mindfully listening within, self-care rituals, that is the main thing, is the self-care ritual, that anything that we do to love ourselves where we can like unplug is so important. That is the recharge time, and it's necessary. It's when we can take the armor off and just like, really let ourselves go and listen to what we want to listen to and hear, and then create what we want to as well. And quiet time, solitude is really important for those things also. And that doesn't mean like going in a room and shutting the door, like going to the beach by yourself or going on a walk by yourself. You can be around other people and still be in that meditative, sacred space.
Actually, you kind of got into it there, and I wanted to ask you kind of what does that look like for you, that self-care? And I think a big point I just want to kind of reiterate there is, that can look different for everyone, and that can look different at different times. I see something happening with many people that are very growth-oriented, myself included. It always starts with being going through it myself, and it's that we sometimes make self-care a chore almost, where we take all these practices and things that we think we should be doing to take care of ourselves, right? And they might be really important things, even they might even be beneficial things, but one thing that I've seen happen is being so putting this pressure on ourselves to do these self-care things that it almost becomes this ironically a contradiction in itself, where it doesn't feel like you're actually caring for yourself at that point. And it I think is a really important point to bring up, that self-care should feel good. And so it's not something to put pressure on yourself to do. It's something that you mentioned, you can make this something where you go on the beach, rather than feeling like, oh, I'm supposed to be meditating, I'm supposed to be reading, let yourself have those moments that feel good, that feel light. Now, like I said, I'm curious to hear kind of what does that typically look like for you? How do you take care of yourself?
Well, I've recently got into this new, excuse me, I'm having a lot of throat chakra activations while we're talking, so I've been like trying not to cough.
Let it out, let it
out. Lately I have been really, well, I say lately, in the last several months, I've really gotten a lot more dialed in to stretching. I was starting to curl up into a ball in my body, literally. My shoulders and everything, my neck starting to pull, my head and my neck and face. I was really going through it in my body. And so I kept hearing that full throttle tapping in my brain telling me to get involved in yoga or stretching or something. And so one of the most important things that I am doing for myself at this point is sitting on the floor. When you sit on the floor versus sitting in furniture, you will automatically get yourself comfortable on the floor. Like it just happens automatically. And I find when I sit on the floor versus sitting on furniture, I stretch and I roll around just like a child would. Because that's our natural essence, and that helps to ground out energy. So I'm all about sitting on the floor now. That's a really big thing. Stretching is really huge. I love to take showers or baths and just ground out energy that way and nurture myself with good food and listening to awesome music. And I have started taking time, like I haven't been one that sits in the lotus and closes my eyes and goes off into this meditative state. It's something that I do mostly with my eyes open. And at any time, meditation is a state of mind. It's going back to that zero center gravity of the human with its channel. And so just practicing clearing the mind. I'll go to bed an hour early, or I'll just go lay down in the bed and just close my eyes sometimes and just listen and watch and just see what comes in. Just write something down. Lately, I've been feeling inspired to grab a pen and a piece of paper and just write thoughts down. And it's anything that nurtures the soul, that we can unplug from the daily routine and just love ourselves up in whatever that ways. And sometimes that means I curl up and go cry out something I'm feeling, or I just give myself the space to pout, I mean, like, we are still human in our cosmic activated astral selves. And I find that self-care ritual is so important to allow ourselves to feel things when they come in. It's not just always about feeling good. We have to nurture ourselves through the things that don't, so we can come back full circle to that gravity center of our field, of our energy field. And so being gentle to ourselves and our own thought processes, I mean, that's the biggest self-care ritual there is, creating the reality that we want in here for the outside. So those are some of the things I do.
Some amazing examples.
How about yourself?
Thank you for asking. I was actually just thinking about this recently. In these conversations on the podcast, I like to go for a very conversational flow, just casual conversation. But I realized one of the things that kind of unfolds, because it's an interview, is I don't get asked questions back ever. Very, very rarely do I get a question asked back, because typically how interviews unfold is question, the guest answers, question, the guest answers. So I do appreciate you asking me. It gives me a chance to answer a question. It's interesting because a lot of the stuff that you brought up are things that I'm also involved with. I think perhaps the one that comes to mind, and it's been the most important for me, well, it's a collection, actually. It's a collection of different things, is my morning routine. My morning routine for the last few months, at least, has been so sacred for me. It's been so important, so sacred. Yes. I call it my daily priming. So one thing that I suggest to everyone is your first hour of your day is yours, no matter what. You make sure that you take that first hour for you, because if you do, you will show up so much more powerfully in everything that you do for everybody else. So my suggestion is, whatever time you need to wake up. People say, oh, well, I have to go to work. Well, just wake up an hour earlier and get that hour in. Because that hour can be what sets you up for success, for winning for the entire day. Prepares you for, it sets that tone for the rest of the day. So my first hour looks something like this. And the other thing I'll say is I also make it a what do I need thing. That's kind of one of the questions that came to that flowed through when you were talking. You said, it's self-care is about nourishing your soul, right? So the question that comes through to me when I hear you say that is, it's in asking, what does my soul need right here, right now? What do I want right now? So some days that's going to look different for me in that first hour. Some days, I need something different. Perfect example. So I have my routine that I'll get to in a sec, but perfect example. 2 days ago, I woke up 5 a.m. Rather than do a sitting down meditation, which is part of what I usually do in that first hour, I'm like, I want to listen to some music. And here I was at 5 a.m. in the morning with some music on, dancing in my studio apartment that I'm renting with my girlfriend. She's in the bed right in front of me sleeping, and I'm just dancing to music. And that's what I needed on that day, and I felt so good. That was that morning was probably one of my best feeling mornings in the longest time. So it really is for me, what do I want? What do I need in that first hour to prime myself to feel good and just raise my frequency? But again, there's a typical flow too that usually pans out, and it looks something like this. First thing is about 10 to 15 minutes of what I call bioenergetics, which is kind of just a fancy way of saying stretching mixed in with deep breathing, moving the body, getting the energy to flow. Again, just very free flowing, just whatever I feel like my body wants to do, I do. Bioenergetics. After that, once I feel a little energized, a little bit mobile, I usually go into at least half an hour of meditation. Inward time, just usually, you mentioned something interesting, although I probably won't dive too deep into it. It's the meditation with your eyes open. Sometimes I feel like that's needed to connect outward, to connect with what's around us. But I make sure that I have at least some time in that morning to go inward, and that's where I do my 30 minutes of meditation or so. And then the last thing that I do that's probably a little bit new to some people, so I know most people, a lot of people know that they should be stretching, or stretching is beneficial and meditation is beneficial. One practice that I don't hear much people talking about and has been really, really powerful for me is what I call stream of consciousness writing. So what I do is I pull up a note app, and I do a lot of writing for my Facebook page. But in this moment, it's not about crafting this amazing piece of art that I'm going to go post onto Facebook. Rather, this stream of consciousness practice is just watching what's occurring in my mind, observing everything that's occurring, and writing everything that I hear. And if that sounds like gibberish, let it be gibberish. But that practice, I honestly, it's one you just got to do and feel for yourself, because it's amazing some of the clarity and awareness that has come through in that. I just open myself up to watch, put no pressure on myself to make it anything in particular, which I think we often do when we try to write and to create as people putting out a message. No, this is about taking that pressure off and just letting it flow, and it's unbelievable some of the clarity that I've connected to because of just simply taking the pressure off and just watching what was happening in my mind. And then after that hour, it's game time. I'm ready. I'm feeling good. It's time to get to the mission. That's where it usually goes from there.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. Yeah, I agree with you 100% about that that morning ritual. Like, and I've had those thoughts too, like hearing the excuse of, well, but I get up at this time already, and it's like really like getting in the routine of getting up that extra hour. It may take a couple of days, but the results are phenomenal, because that time is yummy, like to go in and make a cup of tea and have a hot shower and sit and just listen to music or write, like you say. Excuse me, my throat chakra's going off again.
It's happening.
And it really assists with grounding the energy out. It's not thinking about what I have to do at the office or on my way to work or on my way to the gym or any of that stuff. It's just that personal, yummy time. And it makes such a huge difference in the restorative energy that we actually have for the entire day. I actually noticed something. I automatically was getting up in the 4 o'clock hour for months. And I realized that waking up either before or with the sun, there's something totally different with rising with the photons of the sun versus waking up when the sun is already up. I have a completely different feel for the entire day. If I wake up at 8 or 9 o'clock, I can get a lot more tired later. If I wake up between 5 and 6 or 4 and 6 and ride the photons in, it's like a completely different thing. Now, we're programmed to feel that if we wake up that early, we're not going to have enough energy in the day because maybe we have to do it like every now and then. But when there's a routine, when the body and the mind and the brain is used to waking up like that, it's like it expects it in this like really medicinal way for the body. It's really amazing. I love it.
So when you wake up, it's still dark, but it's kind of sunrise coming up as you're getting up, sort of thing.
For the most part, sometimes I'll sleep in. It just depends on what's going on in the ether or how late. I don't stay up too late at night. But yes, I prefer waking up before the sun's up or as the sun is rising, hands down. It's much more of a creative flow. I feel when the 6 o'clock hour is a really cool, majestic hour. I'll channel some really cool feelings during that hour that's really different. And the 5 o'clock is really cool too. So I highly suggest doing that, even if it's just on the weekends, like when we think we want to sleep in more, or, just we don't have to do everything all at once. So taking the time to try different things out is how we find our niches.
That's a really good point too, right? It's experimenting, seeing what works for you. Yeah. And definitely, I think my experience has been when I wake up at those early hours right before the sun comes up. I personally love that. And again, that's not even to say that's going to be what everyone's going to enjoy and be their best with. But I think the big point is, why not give it a shot and see how it works for you, right?
Yeah.
Totally. like you said, there's a lot of programming that goes on that leads us, and I think this is a perfect kind of segue into a bigger topic too, even, is that we have these programmed beliefs around how things are, and that can very much kind of have an influence and shape our experience of things. Now, if we put aside those beliefs and open up, be open-minded, that's a word that gets tossed around a lot, but how often are we truly willing to say, I'm going to be completely open to something being completely contradictory to my previous belief system, and allow for whatever to unfold, in the way that it would naturally, rather than letting my beliefs kind of shape and influence that experience. And I think that's where we get into the conversation that I've been wanting to have with you, because I know it's a topic that we were both very much into these days. I saw that you posted a couple of videos lately, and it's the reprogramming of the mind. I'm just going to let you flow. What comes through when you think of reprogramming of the mind, and your thoughts?
Yeah, it's something that I have been in tune with for a while now. Our programming, our thought processes, and really it's about recognizing that our belief system is based off of influence of the past. And whatever we choose to believe is what we have internally made an agreement with, whether we realize it or not. Anything that we were told as a child, which a lot of it, I'll speak from my own personal experience, I don't remember a lot of it. And so there's a lot of things that, happens to us that we don't remember that is programming. So really, instead of like looking at the past and all of that, it's about looking in the present moment and thinking or feeling, okay, like if something comes up that doesn't feel good, whether it's a negative thought about ourselves, about someone else, or even something, whatever that is, that's a moment to pause, because if it's from fear and pain, it's from a memory. Inspiration, that channel flow, when you talk about your morning ritual is getting up and just letting the flow come through, that's from the channel, that's from inspiration. And so I realized that the programming and how we operate on a daily basis is from the subconscious mind. And we get to program that because it's programmed already, right? That's the difference. When we look within ourselves, we get to see the programming from a different vision. And so we get to see the outside world in this whole new light. The veil gets removed layer after layer after layer. And it can be a traumatic thing sometimes. But it's glorious overall, because we get into our authentic selves, and then we get to realize that we get to steer the wheel of our programming. And the other thing is too, is that our thought processes come in from programming, and we're really listening most of the time. We're listening to the channeled thoughts that are coming in from either inspiration or memory, which is fear from the past. And we get to
Sorry,
make an
Lori, I'm just gonna
agreement
get
with,
you to rewind a second there because it got a little bit choppy. You said
okay.
we get to, I think you said observe, or take it from you
Yes,
get to realize that we're in control of our programming.
yes, we are. We are in control of our programming because of the agreements we make
Right.
with the things we see in the outside world, the things that people tell us on the outside world, and then, of course, all of the beings and our guides and all of the thoughts that come in either from inspiration, which is the channel, or comes from the programmed past. And so that's really our two pipelines of creation. We can agree to inspirational thoughts from the channel, which come in to assist us on our path and our journey, or we get to continue to make agreements of cycling things from the past that keep coming up. And a lot of time it can come from embedded DNA, things from our ancestors, and even a passerby. I feel like I hear, there's a lot of thoughts coming in, and I feel like I'm of a pretty high mind. I generate high thoughts. And there are times when things come into my mind about myself and other people and things that are not in my spectrum. They don't resonate with my vibration. However, they're still there because there are different entities and beings and other people. We pick up telepathy and thoughts from other people. So when we realize that we don't have to make an agreement to anything that comes into our mind, when we're listening, we get to choose to make those agreements. And so that's part of our programming. And it's just recognizing that, whoa, that thought, that doesn't resonate with me. I don't agree with that. Or, ooh, I like that inspiration. I'm going to write that down because I agree with that. And that's the beautiful thing. That is self-mastery. That is the power of choice. In this human spectrum, we are here in this experience, and we have the freedom to steer the wheel of choices of thoughts that come in, and other people's thoughts too. Because when we meet someone and they tell us their thoughts and what they think about something, we can either make an agreement with what they're saying or not attach to it at all. That is the number one thing that assists humans in this life to enjoy this experience better. Is realizing that we don't have to take everything personally. We get to program our minds how we want. I mean, think about it. It's just like having a dog that is a conditioned believer, a knower. Humans are the same way. We have children. We are children. We are conditioned to believe this, believe that. And it's the same thing. We train dogs or animals with a reward system. If
Mm-hmm.
you do good, you get a treat. We encourage that good behavior. But if you do something we think is wrong, then you go in timeout. And it's the same thing as when we're children. Just because our parents told us things from their point of view doesn't mean we have to agree to that. The way our parents treated us based on their own program doesn't mean that we have to agree to that. And so when we turn the outside world off for a little bit, even if it's just a few moments a day, got to get that channel open and moving, we get to realize that, oh, we get to control the programming, just like with the TV and the news and the radio and anything online, anything in a newspaper, in a book, anything anyone says. It's all based on perception. It's all based on perception, seeing the reality of others through our own perception, so we create our internal world through our programming, and we are so influential as humans. We walk around influencing each other all day long, and it's a huge responsibility. I feel as though it's a huge responsibility in how we interact with our coworkers, how we treat our spouses, how we treat our children. It's all about our own internal programming and the influence that we're having on other people's minds. Like, it's a big deal, like, it's really like, that's been the biggest eye-opener for me, is the power of our own influence. And I think when we become responsible of our own influence, that means we're being mindful of ourselves, and that's a game changer.
So much power and potency in everything that you've just shared. One thing I just want to pick out that I particularly like is your use of the phrase, we get to. We get to. And I think that's such an important thing to begin your sentences with, and the ways that you think and the way that you speak to yourself. I get to, because what that does there is puts the power into your hands. I'm the one in control.
Yeah.
I'm the one with the power to, and this is a gift to me. You become the person that not only is recognizing that we have the gift of control, the gift of creative powers in our hands. You become grateful for that, and then again you take control for that, over that. And it's a flip of a switch. The moment that you start thinking in terms of, I get to do this, I get to control this, I get to be this, and take that power back into your hands, rather than where I think a lot of people put it, and it's in those external circumstances, into those past events. And when you come back into that driver's seat, I think one of the big realizations that we can make, and you brought this up, is, everything is a function of our programming, right? Our programming is the filter, I would say, through which we perceive the world. Everything that we perceive, everything that we feel is passing through this filter and this process of our internal programming. And that includes our thoughts, right? So that pick and choose kind of mentality, it's something that I think, we know that we know that thinking good thoughts make us feel good. We know that thinking bad thoughts don't make us feel good. But yet we can succumb to these bad thoughts and get stuck in these pattern ways of thinking, because we become identified, I think, with them. And being that we start to believe that this is who I am, this is how I think, these are my thoughts, it's hard, I think, at times to break free from them, because it becomes this, am I lying to myself to think otherwise? If I'm trying to feed in the good thought of, let's say, I'm confident, right? And I'm trying to cultivate confidence. So I'm like, okay, I want to cultivate confidence. I know that I'm being told here that I can cultivate confidence by saying I'm confident, right? And feeding that thought. But I think where a lot of people get stuck is that they aren't able to convince themselves that they're confident because their past shows otherwise. Their past experiences, their past emotions, their past programs want to tell them otherwise, want to say, no, you weren't confident in these situations. You haven't been confident in your past. How could you be confident if this is who you were? This is who you are. There's no lying to myself. And so I think the big thing that we can do here is first in that realization that we don't have to accept these old programs, and that's all they really are. They're programs and identifications that we can choose, and we don't have to choose those old programs, because the way in which we truly transform ourselves is saying, this is outdated, I want an upgrade, I want an upgraded new system, an upgraded new program, and because this no longer lines up with what I want my future to be, the way that it came through recently, and actually, another thing that you were helpful in catalyzing for me was you posted a video of Joe Dispenza a few weeks ago, I think, and it was a meditation. I absolutely love him, and I think he said it like this. I've been listening to that meditation, by the way. It's you got the choice, and you actually there's parallels into what you're saying here. It's you can think in the past, right, which is that old programming. Use your past to define how you think now, and define your belief system based on the past. You can keep thinking in the past, or you can look into the future, create this vision in your mind of, what do I want to be, what do I want to feel, what do I want my reality to look like, and begin to program yourself for that. If you want to feel confident, the question I think he brought up was, what would it be like to feel confident? What would it be like to feel healthy? What would it be like to feel in love? And using that, what would it be like, that envisioning of the future, to reshape how you feel in the now, choosing that feeling right now rather than just being in that old pattern way of thinking and feeling. That's the moment you say, I'm going to choose that because I want that, and I no longer want this, you take back that control and you get to choose to feel that way. I think that's what reprogramming is all about.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I was going to actually bring up Dr. Joe Dispenza as well, because one of the things also that is important to realize, I love his book, Becoming Supernatural. I reference that book often. And one of the things that I recognize, and what he writes about as well, is that it's not just about our thought processes, that our body, the molecular structure, is programmed to react to the thoughts, which create feeling, and vice versa. So the body builds a chemical response to memory that we attach feeling to. The subconscious mind doesn't understand feeling. That's the human. I call it the mind's file. It programs everything in there to pull back up, which then we set in action through our body, through feeling. And so when we are removing or adding new programming in, we have to recognize that the body has to go through the process of reprogramming also, because that solar plexus gets triggered a lot. That anxiety feeling hits us right in the gut and things like that, and fear. Well, because that's the molecular chemical response to the programming. So I was going through this fight or flight thing recently for months, and I was just constantly getting triggered, constantly. And I'm pretty good at reprogramming in here, and I was just not able to move past it. And so during my visit in Lafayette, Louisiana, I was having some cognitive reframing done with Danielle. She's amazing there. And one of the things I realized is that this fight or flight thing, and it's because I was, instead of not reacting, not agreeing to the things that were coming through my mind that were triggering me, I was constantly working to reprogram it, constantly thinking the opposite and saying, no, that's not the way I feel. So finally I got to the point where instead of like reprogramming something, I would just stop the chemical reaction in my body and literally say in my mind, I'm not reacting to this. And boom, my body energy would come back down. I'm not reacting to this. So I was allowing my body to go through the transition with me. And it takes time. Some things are deeply programmed in there.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, then we get to make all this space for all the inspirational stuff. So the body goes through the reprogramming, the mind goes through the reprogramming, and it's so easy. Like, it's really simple. Like, what I've come to recognize in my own mind and my brain and my programming is that the brain, we are so simple. Like, we really don't have to like really try to do anything. I will literally tell my brain what to do and it'll start doing it for me automatically. Like the next day or something, I'll say, whoa, I started doing that thing automatically. So just talking to the brain, creating the neuro pathways, the circuitry. Like Danielle, during our during that cognitive reframing, she told me to design an island, what my island would look like. And so I started doing that, and I still do it. I think about the trees, the fruit I'll grow there, the kind of people, the consciousness that would be there, just, you know, creating these neuro pathways of pulling in what I want, as if I already had it. I go and visit the island, and I see these people there, and I have these feelings there, because really, like, all we have to do is tell it what we want, and it'll start pulling it in for us in these amazing creative ways. And through inspiration, it's like, oh, I see I want that. Well, then all of a sudden the inspiration will come in of what we need to do to make that happen. And it just takes the human going, oh, okay, this is what I can do to achieve that goal that I've created. And then it's up to the individual to put that momentum behind it. Because it's like we can think things in here all day, but there is a level of engagement that creates that reprogramming that we want to in the physical, as above, so below. We can't to create the outward reality. We have to engage internally and outwardly. It's about the momentum, the energetic momentum.
I'm really, really glad that you brought up the thoughts and the feelings and the connections between the two, because, and you mentioned this is happening on a physiological level. I think that's important to bring up because you know, sometimes, you know, it's just supporting what we know with a little bit of, you know, hardcore evidence to just deepen into that awareness. Now, the feeling you mentioned is a bodily reaction, right? That's not just happening in the mind. That's happening through your being, through your body, your entire being. And recognizing that these feelings reside there, I think, opens up a whole spectrum for higher awareness, because you start to see it's just understanding what these feelings are, so that you can play with them and you can reprogram, right? So what you're saying is that reprogramming process is in not just seeing what's happening up in here, but feeling into the feeling response in your body that occurs in relation to these programs and these patterns. And it's interesting because you're speaking to something that I've started to practice myself, and I've known from experience how important this is when you catch that feeling, you come into awareness of that feeling, right? You have that thought. It can be difficult sometimes to, I'm not going to think this way. I'm not going to think this way. I have a thought. I'm not going to think this way, right? And there becomes this like internal battle in your mind of how you're being pulled by the patterns you're being pulled into thinking, and then, you know, even the thought that's saying I don't want to think this way, I want to think higher frequency thoughts. But then what I've noticed is if you leave it at that, it can be difficult because of that feeling aspect of the programming. And if you don't watch what's occurring on that level, it can be difficult to reprogram, because you're not really seeing the entire program. You're only seeing the thought, but you're not seeing the feeling response. So what I'm suggesting here, and what I think what I'm getting from what you shared as well, is when you observe the feeling response that you are having to these thoughts, that's when you can start to kind of allow for this aspect of the experience, the feeling, to kind of settle, right? You said, the moment you said, I'm not going to respond to this thought, rather than trying to combat it with the other thought of I'm gonna think this instead. First observed how you were feeling and said, I'm not going to respond to this, and that kind of cut that program, cut that cycle of feeling the way that you did in response to those thoughts. And then I think we can start to integrate those higher frequency thoughts and start to cultivate in our bodies a higher frequency after we've observed what's occurring on that feeling level. So I think that's a really, really important thing that you brought up. Okay, so I just want to kind of switch gears here, because there's a question that kind of just popped in my mind, and I wanted to ask it earlier on in the conversation, but I let things flow. You mentioned how some of the things that you talk about can be a little bit out there for people, right? And some people can look at that and just I think you know where this is going. We like to get pretty crazy in the Ascenders community, especially over these last 6 months. I'll bring it back to this quickly, and it's 6 months ago. Actually, I think, yeah, I wanted to tell you about this. It's a bit of a story, so I won't get into the details of it, but another thing that you kind of triggered or played a part in triggering was when I first started coming across your content. This was actually among the first little phase of hearing about this term DNA activations. Okay, so you were probably one of the first people I heard talking about DNA activations. Now that stirred up a little bit of intrigue in me, and I started to look into things. And if I'm not mistaken, it was in looking up that sort of topic and area of discussion, activation, that led into me landing upon some stuff. I'm gonna make it quick because I know who I'm talking to, and I know what the tribe is all about these days. So that led into me landing on a page that triggered a connection with the extraterrestrial race called the Arcturians, which I'm sure you've heard of. That's the short version. Okay, the very first time I ever felt any sort of connection with a higher dimensional race occurred after following this kind of cascade of events of finding about DNA activations, looking into it, and that led into a pretty tangible connection and contact with a higher being. That's a short version. We're not going to dive too deep into it today, but I just want you to know that you played another part in that. Now, kind of where I want this to go, just because this is what I'm all about. Let's get crazy. So some of the stuff that you talk about, people say, I'm sure you're met with skepticism. And about 6 months ago, a little over 6 months, when this first happened to me, and I shared it publicly, I was met with a little bit of skepticism as well. Not a little bit, a lot of bit of skepticism. I want to hear about some of that. I want to hear about what are some of the stuff that you come through with that some people just can't get.
Yeah, it's a broad spectrum. We can talk about DNA activations on a cellular level of what we can do that happens to us all around us. And then we can go all the way to the contactee cosmic stuff that's happening, the ascension process. And the first thing that comes up, one of the first things that I started getting into when I got activated is epigenetics. And epigenetics talks a lot about, it's all about DNA and how the environment of our DNA shifts based on our own environment. So DNA activation, cellular DNA regenerative processes come from many different things. And the number one thing is our thought process. We activate ourselves to higher realms through our thought processes. We're creating a higher vibrational environment for our cells, the electrons and protons, and all of the things in our body. You can read about neuroscience. You can really dive into epigenetics. The food that we eat, the environment we live in, the thoughts that we think, all create a shifting environment for our DNA. And and there just so happens to be this lovely cosmic ascension taking place interdimensionally within our universe here as human beings on planet Earth. And it is a co-created, assisted ascension that is taking place. And it's coming from the cosmic winds, the sun, the planetary alignments, the galactic forces that are around us all the time. We are all, going through this process one way or the other. The frequency of this planet is shifting to higher vibrations, and that means that the humans are as well. Now, we are affected greatly by the moon. The moon pulls on the ocean tides. Our body is made up of almost purely water. Therefore, we are affected by each change as well. So anything that happens galactically, if there's a solar flare, there's solar winds, or whatever we want to call those streams of energy that come in, it's activating us at a higher frequency. And so there are lots of us talking about it all over the internet. You can go through the last several years on my Facebook feed and read the comments and see that it's happening all over the world. And that has been the biggest driving force for me to continue to talk about and share the mission that we are on here, is that we are not the only beings. And some of us are elevated in our connection with as being a contactee with different E.T. spectrums. And so I was activated for the first time in 2013. 2013 was a big one. 2005, there was the little thing that happened I didn't realize. And then in 2013 in July, I began seeing 333 and 911 on the clock. And I instinctively began monitoring these algorithm of number codes that I was being shown on the clock. And I started to be able to gauge the rhythm of my life and what was happening around me according to these, what I call binary codes of consciousness. Each human has an algorithm, and it's all mathematics and numbers. Each human has an algorithm. Our consciousness has a code. And when we're activated and we start seeing these numbers on the clock, it's because we are now being activated into a higher frequency to pick up these codes. And so it's all divinely planned out. Each person is activated in their own spectrum. And then we can do things within ourselves to connect to that frequency as well. And so I began activating again, or I was activated in 2013, and then at the beginning, in the first quarter of 2016, right after I got sober and cleaned up my life in huge ways, I got activated as a contactee. And I started, it happened so fast. I started getting all these physical feelings and these like energetic feelings, bubbles inside of my body, all this new consciousness and these new feelings were flowing in. And I was starting to get more awareness of the E.T., the galactic spectrum of reality. And it's just completely grown from that, almost on a daily basis. There is something going on within my body and in my brain. I feel physical activations and energy on a daily basis, and it has grown significantly since 2016. I have definitely gone through the spectrum. For the first year and a few months, it was strictly my vessel was being upgraded, physically feeling the activations, beaming in my body, And instinctively, I knew that my DNA was being activated, upgraded in some way. And and then in the summer of 2017 is when I then integrated with my avatar and the channeling started. And then I realized that I was a healer and not just a human alien girl, that there was this greater, bigger purpose going on in my life. And so, I've been integrating both of these spectrums, which are the same but totally different,
Both being the
for the last
healer,
few years.
both being
Right, the healer and mhm.
the light language.
Yeah, both being in the light language healing energy spectrum, and then as a contactee.
Okay.
There's a couple of different programs of fields that I go through, and while everything's all interconnected, it definitely has sort of like categories or different programs, that I experience on a daily basis.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so let's see, where do we want to take this? I'm so glad that we're diving into this. This is gonna get fun.
Yeah, me
It
too. This is
already
the
has.
best.
Um, okay, so I guess the first thing is you're saying I was activated in 2013, 2016, and you kind of explained the what's happening there when you described it as such. Now, what is I guess I think there's people on that brink of being activated and are receiving activations and receiving upgrades, but they're not in that state of awareness where they're recognizing it for that. And I think one of the most important things we can do is open up to receive. Open up to receive an upgrade, an activation, a in higher guidance. Now, that of course entails that we're able to feel into these things and observe what's happening on this level. Now, I kind of want to just hear you speak to like how do we come into awareness of what's happening? Maybe even just get into what did you notice when this first started happening for you? How did you know that this was planning out? Was there some sort of instant experience that really triggered things for you that you knew like this is I'm being activated here? Where did you come into that awareness?
Yeah, well, things started happening little by little, just little bitty things like getting kicked out of that group and opening my profile, and then noticing that all of a sudden there were people that were like asking me to be friends and liking my posts and sharing the things I was talking about. And it was all like in the love and light spectrum at first. And then things started to evolve more and more. I instinctively started feeling new interest in new things. I think that is the biggest clue. Like all of a sudden, all this like inspirational stuff started coming in, these new awarenesses, and like the things I was thinking about wasn't necessarily matching up to my old reality anymore.
Mm.
I started feeling this big shift in the way that I saw the outside world and how I was engaging with it. And while internally starting to feel things differently within, and it can feel like you're losing your mind. Like I call it, a lot of us call it going down the rabbit hole, the spiral down into really diving in to
Mm.
look at ourselves. And then, it can feel like this big swirl. And I think that if you or someone or myself, like starting to feel the feeling of wanting to be more isolated, wanting to be more introverted, that is a huge indication of a shift. And it'll start to happen naturally. Like that's I think one of the biggest things that I see a lot of people say is that all of a sudden, and it happened to me too, that the outside world, it started changing so much, and the way I was feeling, I couldn't help but to move out of the spectrum in which I was in. I got out of the restaurant industry after 20 years. I stopped using drugs. I got sober. I completely changed I simplified my life. I got rid of like most of my belongings, basically activated to get reborn. It's like rebirth, get stripped away of everything so that we can come back in. And that can be really overwhelming. That is the start of recognizing that there's a shift in consciousness taking place, that someone has now been activated. And usually the number sequences start right away. People start seeing 11:11 on the clock. They start noticing synchronicities. That is the alignment. There's a shift in awareness. We're picking up on a reality that we didn't see before because the cosmic energy is raising our neurotransmitters in our bodies, our molecular cells, up to this higher frequency. So our brain is thinking differently, and we're starting to see and feel all of our senses change. Like, it's a total different shift, and it happens so fast. I mean, it happened so fast for me, like literally within a matter of a couple of months, my entire reality changed.
Wow.
I went back, I took off and started traveling around the United States for 5 months, living in a tent and like hitchhiking and telling people I was spreading the word of love and light. Like, it was insane. I've never wanted to do anything like that in my life. And I realized it was my self-mastery journey to strip myself away from my own fears, my own thought processes, to get rid of all these material things that were just holding me back from really exploring my true nature. And then I started getting more and more cosmic alignments, more contactee stuff. I've got a lot of wild stories about the moon, seeing it in its authentic satellite self, not the disk that we see in the sky. I have rainbow lightning, which is teleportation on video. And, you know, I've actually finally had contact from the cloud traveler. So like I've had witnesses to all of these things. And so that's what gives me strength. That's what pulls me back around full circle. It's like, whoa. Is as crazy as it can feel in here sometimes with all this, I remember the things that I've seen in the physical world that I've been shown. And there's not one thing that someone can tell me at this point that would change my mind, because I witnessed these events and these things that are going on. And so it's all boils down to listening within. If someone is telling you you're crazy, you might want to rethink it. Like, it's time to like really look inside and not take on what someone else says just because they're not in that same spectrum of alignment. I mean, and the other thing is too, is I don't walk around talking to people about being an E.T. contactee. And you know, like, so I use my own discernment with my own energy. And I feel as though online, through social media, it's a great way to put out content without having to take that personal reaction from people, you know, in the flesh all the time. It's what's built my own confidence. And I've had to go through a lot of fears, and I still sometimes feel fears of speaking truth about our authentic reality and being a healer and channeling all of these guides and avatars, or whatever we want to call it. There's a set of fear that comes along with all of that too. And so it's just about going with what feels good. That instinct feeling, no matter what it is, we know that that is the true nature of who we are. And like I say, get online and do some research. There's a lot of people talking about this stuff, so it's not just you and I.
There you go. There you go. You know,
Yeah.
that was a big wake up call for me too. It's I think there's such a beautiful thing in going out there and connecting with others, you know, that you can relate to, and that because that you will feel that support. That's my experience of it. When I put out that video, I had friends and family that, you know, were close to me that thought it was crazy, right? I remember hearing the words, "I'm worried about you." But I also had a amazing group of people that contacted me and said, I'm so glad that you did that. You just helped me realize that I'm not the only one, kind of thing. I'm glad to see you be courageous. And these are strangers at the time. And some of these strangers are in the stream right now with me and have grown into becoming family. Right. And that's important. I mean, there's so much I want to talk about with regards to what you shared, but I just want to really pull out that point that there's people out there that can relate to you, that you can connect with, that will support you. But even more importantly than that is you got to be your own support system by going within, as you've said, and be that through it all. And you say, go with what feels good, right? And I see it. I see it, right? You trust yourself, trust what feels right, trust what feels good. But there still tends to be some of those blocks that keep us from really trusting in that. So, I mean, that's a process, I think, of its own, just stripping away those
Yes.
layers. There's just so much. There's so many different directions we can take this. Um, I like stories. I want to hear about stories. Yeah, that's where my curiosity lies right now. Um, First story that comes to mind.
Well, the most I mean, I've got like a handful of the most spectacular stories. And the one that came in immediately was the day that my avatar integrated
What does that
and I
mean?
began channeling. So, I was visiting Heather Weeks. She's amazing, and she's in Iowa. Um, in the summer of 2017. And I went there to visit her and several people from Facebook in the surrounding area. We're going to travel in. We were going to do some energy stuff. And the second day that I was there, and Heather is also activated in the ET contact T circuit as well. We channel a lot of, where her and I are very connected energetically in that way. And I was there, like I say, the second day, just getting integrated and oriented there. And I was downstairs with someone, and her and I were talking, and I felt this pull to go outside. And it just happened that no one else was at the house. Everyone else had gone into town for a bit. So it was her and I there. As soon as I walk outside, I saw a cloud, and we can talk about the cloud travelers in a little bit. And anyway, I saw a cloud traveler there, and this time it was a perfectly round cloud that you could see all the way around the sky underneath, and there was a hole, and a perfect hole in the bottom of it. And they're generally flat bottom, dark colored on the bottom. They are dark colored clouds. And so I instinctively knew that that's what was going on. And I remember her and I went outside, and I remember standing there, and the cloud was so close. I kept telling her, I feel like I could just reach up and touch it. Like it was like the sky had been dropped down above us or something.
Hmm.
And she said, the girl that was with me said, I feel like I can't stand up. And I instinctively told her, just lay down on the ground. She was feeling this vibration that I wasn't feeling. It was different. And so the cloud is above me, and I had this feeling to just put my hands up and turn around and twist. So the cloud started twisting above me, and then nothing really happened at that moment. And I just instinctively told her, okay, let's get up. Let's get up. Let's go inside and go back downstairs, and let's just lay down for a little bit. So we went back into the room where I was staying. And about that time, she gets curled up in a ball, and she's talking about how her stomach hurts and she's just not feeling good. And then all of a sudden, on the right side of my brain, I get this really powerful headache. Just all of a sudden, I thought my brain was going to explode at one point. I was really starting to get nervous, and I was just like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. Well, then all of a sudden, I started convulsing. My legs and my arms, and I started shaking. I started like my bottom was
Uncontrollably.
still on the bed. uncontrollably. And she like turns around and looks at me, and she's on the ET circuit too, so she didn't like freak out or anything. I mean, we were all there for a reason. But of course, it's like, what's going on? And I'm like, what's going on? And so my body's like coming up off the bed. I'm swirling around wildly, and I just know to trust instinctively. I just knew. It's a feeling. Like, we think we fear these things because of what we're shown on TV. And I feel like, not that it doesn't show fear, but instinctively, it's been very peaceful this entire time. And so, for the most part, it's a little wild for my humans sometimes. And so Heather got back from town, I guess, and she came downstairs and she saw what was going on and was like, whoa. Well, as I was going through these movements, my arms and legs started flailing all over the place. I saw all of a sudden that in my channel, I saw myself. It was very Native American. And I threw my arms out. I was kind of on stage or facing a huge crowd of people. I could feel it in my mind, And I was awarded feathers. Like, I remember draping my arms like this on the inside, and it was a ceremony.
Were you in a different vessel, or is it still Lori that you're seeing?
Still, well, I'm seeing it
First
through
person?
I'm being shown a video, like a picture of what's happening. So my avatar, my higher self, is come in, and that day was awarded these feathers during this ceremony. And then I started doing all of this dancing. All of a sudden I popped up and I started going through different timelines of dance, which I thought was very in like the 1920s, and each timeline. And I don't do these dances, and I started doing these different dances. And then that's when everything changed. The integration process, I've got some videos of the next day after where I'm just flailing around crazy. And and so that's when I knew that life was not going to be the same anymore. I didn't even fly back to Florida where I was living. Everything changed. And so I was integrating, trusting, not really knowing what was going on other than it was very Native American. I was actually looking at it as like entity possession is what I was calling it at first. But then I came back around to realize that it was my avatar. It was my higher self. And the way it came into me was very unique. The way it happened, I still don't quite understand all of it. And I don't need to, I don't need to. And then it wasn't until a couple of months later when I moved to San Francisco, and all of a sudden, as I'm very expressive with my hands, and I started catching myself as I was talking, throwing up the magic mudra. And I would be like, whoa, what's that? And then it started from there. I started doing different mudras, and so then I had some time to integrate through that. And then several months later, it was on 12/20 in 2017, the night before the 12/21 gateway, when I got activated into this whole spectrum. I was shown the start of what kind of energy worker I am, what kind of healer I am, and it's grown since then. So I went through many, many months of isolation and integration. I had to go what I call like avatar boot camp. My body had to build up the energy to this. And so now we're much more, I'm much more unified in my channel. And it's just been so mind-blowing since then. Everything has changed. And, we are so powerful as human beings. This vessel that we are, possessed in, the host, like our entity is in this host suit, is so phenomenal. I have come to understand the body and to honor my temple even more now, because we as human beings can heal ourselves. We don't need any other outside influence to do that. And we can heal each other. We can clear out energy that may be stuck in the body. We can do all these amazing things for one another. And, going through the activation process of the upgrading of the body and the context D stuff has been phenomenal. However, this whole healing spectrum, the work that I see that I've been doing on myself and with others, and the exchange I've had with other people, has completely blown my mind. It has completely blown me away. Sometimes I'm just so speechless, like I'm even like finding the words to truly explain it unless you witness it yourself is just really mind-blowing. It's so phenomenal what we can do with our hands, how we can control our energy and the longevity of this suit in our experience here. And so that brings me around to talking about furthering that process in what I'm doing here in Mexico. I traveled to Jocotepec, which is just outside of Jalisco, Mexico, and I am doing a 5-week structural integration certification course. The Clarks, Gerald and Krista Clark, are amazing. The Gravity Body Academy is who I am doing the course through. And it's really phenomenal. It is different from massage. It's different technique. Generally, the suggestion is to do a 10-session series per client. And what it does is that we use our hands and our arms, and we can go through and do these techniques to open up and unwind stuck energy and tissue, to open up the muscles, to allow the spine to align properly. And actually, it activates Kundalini. So it's this amazing body work. I mean, it's basically a stretch further than yoga. Like it's someone doing the yoga on your body with their hands and then using yoga and stretching and other things to maintain the structural work that takes place. We just finished our 5th session this week, so we're over halfway through the course now, and it is really mind-blowing. We are taking before and after pictures, and just by moving the tissue of the body in specific ways, I have gained like 2 inches in height already. The feet, the legs, it's just phenomenal. And so using our hands with mindful intention and a clear space and open heart, we can do such amazing, amazing, amazing work. Like these are things that I'm seeing and feeling and experiencing that we see about in movies, and we read about like miracle work that happens through energy and body changes, and it's all around us because we are that living vessel. We are that miracle energy body worker that every person can do. And so as I'm here and I'm learning more, I'm sharing more about what techniques we're learning here, and I'm so excited to really get more involved because it's about empowering each other to take care of ourselves. It's like, yes, I definitely want to have clients and we'll see clients, but the purpose is to get them where they want to be, or at least on the path to getting there, and empowering them to continue the self-healing.
Lori,
it's pretty amazing.
I love everything that you're bringing through. I love everything that you're sharing, and you're one of the things specifically about it is that you're looking at all the different levels and all the different depths to it just becoming more powerful beings. And when you say we are powerful as human beings, I think that's so important for us to realize that in these vessels we are capable of so much. Yes. And there's so much to our capability and potential that we can further explore and expand into. I think sometimes we can get caught in this way of thinking where the moment we realize that we aren't the body, we want to transcend it, right? We want to be above it. We want to move into higher realms, higher dimensions, right? And yes, that definitely has its place. That's definitely something that we can talk about and ascend into. But let's not forget, and let's not tune into the power that we have in these vessels, because we have come into this experience, this physical experience on this beautiful planet for a reason, and that's to expand into what we're capable of doing in and out of our bodies. So I'm so glad that you're diving into all depths of the conversation here, and it's really important, I think, for us to address things on the level of what can we do on the physical as well as the spiritual, the mental, emotional, which I think we tuned into all of it today. You know, I'm a little disappointed because I wish this conversation could keep going, and it could. But unfortunately, the one thing that's holding it back from doing so is that my phone is about to die. I'm at maybe like 15%. Actually, no, I'm gonna take a quick second to lower the brightness. I might get paused there. Maybe that'll squeeze me in a little bit longer. Yeah, it's. I guess that might be a sign that this needs to be coming to an end. Because I do want to fit in some time for the. I'm getting some comments here saying keep going, keep going. Unfortunately, I can't keep using my headphones and charge the phone at the same time, or I would have just pulled up the battery. But it does look like we're gonna have to start to wrap things up. But one thing that will make me feel a little bit better about this all is, we started going down the rabbit hole a little bit together here, and I feel like we're only, just a little bit into what we could get into. I'm going to do this right here, right now, so that I have a witness audience if I get the yes. But Lori, I'd absolutely love to have you back on the podcast to dive deeper than we've in this episode here. What do you say coming back on sometime in the future?
Yes, I would love that. Let's keep the conversation going, and continue to create these dialogues and dive deeper and deeper into the simplicity of our being. I love that. I love that idea.
I love that you use the word simplicity. That's another important one that I think we should come back to. It really can be simple. Is there anything that you'd like to share with us about what you have going on, where we can find you? I'm going to definitely tag the group Guide to Ascension in the description. Anything else that we should look into? Definitely your Facebook profile is a place that I think people need to be following you as well. Anything else that you'd like to direct our listeners to?
Yes, of course. I have a YouTube channel. It's my name, Lori Ivey, Loriivey. And I've been casually posting things a little over the last year, mostly where I'm talking, and then I've been doing a lot of the channeling activation videos as well, where clear space and activate the chakras and things like that. And people have amazing results from watching those, and have even started throwing mudras around and dancing around watching the activations as well. So definitely check me out on YouTube.
There you go. So let me just say, Ascenders, this is just a little bit of a taste of the sort of power that we can tune into. The conversation we got into here again addressed things on so many different dimensions and levels, and I think it's important that we observe what's going on at each of those levels, right? Again, what's happening at the level of mind, at the feeling in the body, and then we can tap into some of the higher stuff as well. But again, I think the big message that I want to leave off here, that Lori has done such an incredible job of sharing with us, is in these human vessels, as human beings, we are so powerful. We have so much support around us. We have so much family around us, so much love around us. And the more we open up to this, the more that we channel this through, the greater we're all going to be, and the more that we feel this collective ascension process that we're on. So Lori, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, with my deepest appreciation for all that you do for our collective, and for coming on the show and sharing with us your light. Thank you for joining us on Awaken.
Yes, thank you so much. I look forward to this. This has been phenomenal. Thank you so much, Bryan, and all that you're doing. Keep shining your light. It's so bright.
Ascenders, thank you for tuning into this episode of Awaken, and until next time, keep ascending.